On the twins' first move, Nicholas's king is cornered, and his gaze jumps from the pieces to the green eyes identical to his own. The room holds its breath. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. Aliyah Johnson's fingers trembled as she walked the gleaming corridors of the Wellington Mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut. The pregnancy test burned in her pocket like a live coal. 24 years old, Harvard-educated, and now impossibly pregnant with her employer's child. No, children. The doctor had confirmed it yesterday. Twins. The marble floors echoed her footsteps as she approached Nicholas Wellington III's private office. For 6 months, she had crossed the line from personal assistant to secret lover. Their relationship had blossomed during late nights in the library, over chess games and literature discussions when his family traveled. Nicholas saw beyond her humble Bronx origins, or so she had believed. Rain lashed against the windows of the $20 million property, mirroring the storm in her heart. She paused outside the mahogany door, gathering courage. This morning's nausea had been worse than ever, impossible to hide much longer. She knocked once, entered, and closed the door behind her. "We need to talk," she said. Nicholas looked up from the documents spread across his desk, papers for the billion-dollar merger that would consolidate the Wellington empire in the Asian market. His ice-blue eyes registered the pregnancy test in her hand before she could speak. The aristocratic smile she had come to love vanished instantly. "Is this some kind of trap?" he asked, rising abruptly. "Nick, I'm pregnant. They're your children. I never—" "Children? Plural?" His voice trembled momentarily. The doctor detected 2 heartbeats. Twins. The silence that followed was deafening. Nicholas ran his hand through his perfectly trimmed brown hair, his face contorting into an expression Aliyah had never seen before. "You cannot have these babies," he finally declared. "A black domestic without pedigree cannot carry the Wellington legacy. What did you expect? That I would marry you? Turn you into the new Mrs. Wellington? What a scandal that would be." Each word struck Aliyah like a physical blow. "Domestic," she repeated incredulously. "I have a comparative literature degree from Harvard. I work here to finance my master's. You said you loved me. Be realistic, Aliyah. It was fun while it lasted, but there's a difference between fun and reality. Did you truly believe someone like me would end up with someone like you? The maid who cleans my family's bathrooms?" The door suddenly opened. Eleanor Wellington, the family matriarch, 65 and impeccably dressed even at 9 in the morning, stood motionless for a moment, her calculating eyes assessing the scene. "So the rumors were true," Eleanor declared with an icy voice. "Nicholas, your father is waiting in the library. He must be spared this inconvenience." Aliyah tried to speak, but Eleanor raised her wrinkled yet elegant hand. "How much do you want to disappear? To solve this problem?" "They're your grandchildren," Aliyah managed to say. Eleanor laughed, a crystalline sound completely devoid of humor. "Darling, not even in your most ambitious dreams. Stanley." 2 security guards appeared instantly. "Escort Miss Johnson to her room. She has 20 minutes to collect her belongings, only what she brought when she arrived." Aliyah looked at Nicholas, waiting for any sign, any word of defense. He simply averted his gaze, returning to his documents as if she had already ceased to exist. "You'll regret this," she whispered. As the guards escorted her down the hallway, Eleanor caught up with her, pressing an envelope into her hands. $50,000. Enough to solve the problem and start fresh far from here. Be smart. 2 hours later, under torrential rain, a family driver left her at the door of a cheap motel in Stamford. With a suitcase containing some clothes, her books, and the ultrasound showing 2 tiny embryos, Aliyah tore the check into tiny pieces that the rain carried into the gutter. The following months became a nightmare of survival. Pregnant with twins, Aliyah secured 3 jobs, Bookstore clerk in the morning, waitress in the afternoon, and telemarketing operator at night. She slept only 4 hours a day in a tiny apartment in Queens, shared with 2 other women. When her pregnancy became too obvious to hide, she was fired from the bookstore and the restaurant on the same day. During a prenatal checkup at a public clinic, the doctor noticed her exhaustion. "You need to rest or you'll lose these babies." That night, sitting on the communal bathroom floor, Aliyah contemplated the bottle of sleeping pills. For a brief moment, despair almost won. Then she felt movement in her womb, a kick, then another. Her children were fighting to live. "It's not your fault," she whispered, caressing her belly. "And I swear you will never, ever know the name of the man who rejected you before you were even born. You will be Johnsons, just Johnsons. And one day, I'll show Nicholas Wellington that he made the biggest mistake of his life." The next morning, Aliyah made a decision. She called her Aunt Corinne in Detroit, the only family she had left after her parents died in an accident 5 years earlier. 3 days later, she was on a bus to Michigan, determined to survive, protect her children, and someday prove her worth. The Detroit winter hit Aliyah like a physical assault when she stepped off the bus, her thin coat inadequate against the biting cold. Aunt Corinne, a petite woman with silver dreadlocks, embraced her with surprising strength. "You're skin and bones, child," Corinne whispered, her voice breaking. "Let's get you home." Corinne's modest 2-bedroom house in a working-class neighborhood became Aliyah's sanctuary. The spare room had been transformed with 2 second-hand cribs donated by Corinne's church community. "People help when they can," Corinne explained, showing Aliyah the room. "No one makes it alone." As her due date approached, Aliyah registered at the local community college, determined to continue her education. The church community provided baby clothes, while Corinne's network of retired teachers supplied children's books and educational toys. The labor began on a freezing February night. 38 excruciating hours later, with only Corinne and a kind nurse holding her hands, Aliyah gave birth to 2 perfect baby girls. "What will you name them?" the nurse asked, placing the tiny bundles in her arms. Exhausted but triumphant, Aliyah looked at their identical faces. "Dia and Lena Johnson," she replied firmly. "Just Johnson." The first months passed in a blur of exhaustion, diaper changes, and midnight feedings. Postpartum depression crept in, intensified by financial stress and sleep deprivation. But Corinne became her rock, taking the babies when Aliyah needed to rest, reminding her to eat, forcing her to shower. "You're not giving up," Corinne would say whenever Aliyah's tears started. "Those girls need you strong." When the twins were 4 months old, Aliyah secured a position as an assistant at the university library, where she could bring the babies in a double stroller during quiet hours. The library director, impressed by her Harvard background, helped her apply for a partial scholarship for a master's in education. Between diapers, bottles, and textbooks, Aliyah began envisioning a different future. At night, while the babies slept, she studied with desperate intensity, fueled by determination and the memory of Nicholas's cruel dismissal. "One day," she would whisper to her sleeping daughters, "they'll know your names, and they'll regret ever thinking we weren't good enough." On the twins' first birthday, Aliyah, Corinne, and Maya Patel, a classmate who had become Aliyah's closest friend, celebrated with a homemade cake. As the girls smeared frosting on their faces, Aliyah snapped a photo, fighting back tears of pride and lingering grief. "They're fighters like their mama," Maya observed, helping clean up after the tiny celebration. That night, looking at her sleeping daughters, Aliyah made a silent promise. "Someday, you'll have everything you deserve, and the world will know who the Johnsons are." While she kissed her sleeping daughters' foreheads, Aliyah couldn't imagine that her notebook of rudimentary educational app sketches would become the embryo of an educational revolution that would one day bring her face to face with the man who had rejected her. The Detroit winter bit into Aliyah's skin as she stepped off the Greyhound bus. clutching her small suitcase with one hand and supporting her swollen belly with the other. Exhaustion had settled deep in her bones after the 14-hour journey from New York. Snow swirled around her ankles as she scanned the nearly empty station, momentarily wondering if coming here had been a mistake. "Alaya, child, over here." The voice cut through the icy air, and Alaya turned to see Aunt Corinne waving frantically. At 63, Corinne Johnson stood barely 5 feet tall, her silver dreadlocks framing a face etched with the wisdom of decades spent teaching Detroit's most challenging students. Without hesitation, she enveloped Alaya in an embrace that belied her small frame. "You're skin and bones under this coat," Corinne whispered, pulling back to examine her niece. Her eyes flickered briefly to Alaya's 7-month pregnant belly. "Let's get you home before you freeze solid." The ride to Corinne's modest 2-bedroom house in Detroit's Bagley neighborhood passed in relative silence. Alaya watched the snow-covered streets through foggy windows, her mind still processing the dramatic collapse of her former life. Just 3 weeks ago, she had been living in a mansion, beloved, or so she thought, by a man whose family name opened doors throughout Manhattan's financial district. Corinne's home, with its faded siding and small porch, stood in stark contrast to the Wellington estate. Yet when they stepped inside, the warmth, both physical and emotional, enveloped Alaya immediately. "I know it's not much," Corinne said, setting down Alaya's suitcase, "but it's paid for, and no one can take it from us." Tears welled in Alaya's eyes as Corinne led her to the spare bedroom. The room was small but immaculately clean, with freshly painted pale yellow walls. In the corner stood 2 second-hand cribs, already made up with matching quilts. "The church ladies helped," Corinne explained, noting Alaya's surprise. "Pastor William's twins just started kindergarten, so they donated these. The community looks after its own." Alaya ran her fingers across the smooth wood of the cribs. "Aunt Corinne, I don't know how to thank you." "You don't thank family for being family," Corinne replied firmly. "Now sit down before you fall down. You look like you haven't slept in weeks." That night, lying in a bed that wasn't luxurious but was somehow more comforting than any she'd known at the Wellingtons, Alaya felt the twins kick vigorously. For the first time since that rainy morning in Nicholas's office, she allowed herself to cry freely, not from despair, but from relief at having found safe harbor. The final weeks of Alaya's pregnancy passed in a blur of preparations. Corinne's network of former teacher colleagues and church friends rallied around the young mother-to-be. A retired pediatrician from the congregation provided free prenatal checkups. The church's women's circle organized a small baby shower, gifting second-hand clothes, books, and necessities that Alaya could never have afforded on her own. "People help when they can," Corinne explained one evening as they sorted tiny onesies. "No one makes it alone, especially not in this city." Despite the generosity surrounding her, Alaya refused to be merely a recipient of charity. 8 months pregnant, she enrolled in evening classes at the community college, determined to continue her education. During the days, she helped Corinne with her small home-based tutoring business, discovering she had a natural talent for explaining complex concepts to struggling students. Labor began unexpectedly on a freezing February night, 2 weeks before her due date. Corinne drove through a snowstorm to reach Henry Ford Hospital, gripping the wheel with white knuckles while Alaya fought through increasingly intense contractions in the passenger seat. What followed were 38 grueling hours that tested the limits of Alaya's endurance. With no epidural, the twins were positioned awkwardly, making the procedure too risky. She endured pain that made Nicholas's betrayal seem almost trivial by comparison. "You're stronger than this pain," Corinne whispered repeatedly, wiping Alaya's forehead with a cool cloth. "You're fighting for 3 now." When the first cry finally pierced the delivery room, Alaya felt a surge of primal triumph. 5 minutes later, the second baby announced her arrival with an equally indignant wail. "2 perfect little girls," the nurse announced, placing the tiny wrinkled bundles on Alaya's chest. Looking down at their identical faces, both bearing a startling resemblance to her, but with eyes already showing hints of Nicholas's distinctive green-blue, Aliyah made her first decision as a mother. "Their names are Daya and Lena Johnson," she stated firmly when asked. "Just Johnson." The first months of motherhood tested Aliyah in ways she hadn't imagined possible. Nights blurred into days as she navigated feeding schedules, diaper changes, and the bone-deep exhaustion of caring for two newborns simultaneously. Postpartum depression crept in, intensified by financial anxiety and lingering trauma from her abandonment. On the darkest nights, when both babies cried inconsolably and sleep seemed like a distant memory, Corinne would appear silently, taking one infant while Aliyah soothed the other. "You're not giving up," Corinne would say whenever Aliyah's tears started. "Those girls need you strong." By the twins' third month, a routine had emerged from the chaos. Aliyah applied for and received limited government assistance, swallowing her pride because her daughters needed food more than she needed dignity. Corinne adjusted her tutoring schedule to help with childcare while Aliyah looked for work. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. During a visit to Wayne State University's library to research childcare options, Aliyah struck up a conversation with the head librarian about her background in literature and her interrupted studies at Harvard. Impressed, the woman offered her a part-time position as a library assistant, with the unusual benefit of being allowed to bring the twins in a double stroller during quiet hours. "The pay isn't much," the librarian acknowledged, "but the university offers tuition discounts to staff. You could finish your master's degree." With steady, if modest, income and the twins settled into a more predictable rhythm, Aliyah began rebuilding her academic life. She applied for and received a partial scholarship for a master's in education, focusing on technology integration, a growing field that combined her love of literature with practical career prospects. Between diapers, bottles, and textbooks, Aliyah crafted a vision of a different future. At night, while the babies slept, she studied with desperate intensity, fueled by determination and the memory of Nicholas's cruel dismissal. "A domestic without pedigree," he had called her. The words echoed in her mind during late-night study sessions, transforming from wounds into fuel for her ambition. It was during one such late night, rocking Lena back to sleep while reviewing course materials on educational technology, that Aliyah first recognized the gap in educational resources for underserved communities. The fancy private schools that catered to Wellington-type families had cutting-edge computer labs and software. The Detroit public schools, where Corinne had taught for 30 years, often lacked even basic technological tools. "There has to be a better way," she murmured to her sleeping daughter. On the twins' first birthday, Aliyah, Corinne, and Maya Patel, a classmate who had become Aliyah's closest friend, celebrated with a homemade cake. The small living room was decorated with balloons and a handmade banner. As Daya and Lena smeared frosting on their chubby faces, Aliyah captured the moment on the second-hand camera Corinne had given her for Christmas. "They're fighters like their mama," Maya observed, helping clean up after the tiny celebration. Maya, a brilliant computer science graduate struggling to break into the male-dominated tech industry, had become Aliyah's study partner and confidant. "Sometimes I still can't believe they're here," Aliyah admitted, watching the twins play with their few toys on a blanket. "There were moments I wasn't sure we'd make it." "But you did," Corinne interjected, her voice firm, "and you're just getting started." That night, after tucking the girls into their cribs, which they would soon outgrow, Aliyah stood watching their peaceful slumber. Despite the struggles, despite the tiny apartment they had moved into last month to give Corinne back her spare room, despite the mountain of student loans and the exhaustion that seemed permanently etched into her bones, Aliyah felt an unfamiliar emotion stirring within her. Hope. "Someday, you'll have everything you deserve," she whispered to her sleeping daughters, "and the world will know who the Johnsons are." While she kissed her sleeping daughters' foreheads, Aliyah couldn't imagine that her notebook of rudimentary educational app sketches would become the embryo of an educational revolution that would one day bring her face to face with the man who had rejected her. Alaya's whispered promise to her daughters lingered in the air as she closed their bedroom door. 3 years had passed since that first birthday celebration, transforming both her life and the twins. Morning sunlight streamed through the modest apartment windows as Alaya adjusted her graduation cap, the master's tassel swinging gently against her cheek. "Mama smart!" Daya exclaimed, clapping her tiny hands while Lena tried to grab the dangling tassel. "Yes, Mama is graduating today," Alaya laughed, scooping both 3-year-olds into her arms. "And you two are going to sit with Aunt Corrine and be the best-behaved little ladies in the audience, right?" "Best ladies," Lena echoed solemnly, her green-blue eyes, so painfully reminiscent of Nicholas, wide with sincerity. The graduation ceremony at Wayne State University marked a significant milestone in Alaya's carefully reconstructed life. Her master's degree in educational technology had been earned through countless late nights, early mornings, and the juggling act that defined life as a single mother of twins. As she crossed the stage to receive her diploma, the polite applause was punctuated by 2 enthusiastic voices shouting, "Mama smart!" from the audience, causing ripples of amused laughter. "I couldn't be prouder," Corrine whispered, hugging Alaya fiercely after the ceremony. "Your parents would have burst with pride." The mention of her parents, both lost in a car accident shortly before she'd met Nicholas, brought a momentary shadow to Alaya's celebration. "I wish they could have met the girls." "They're watching," Corrine assured her. "Now go celebrate with your classmates. Maya's been waving at you for 5 minutes." The following Monday brought Alaya back to reality as she reported for her new position as a substitute teacher at Detroit's Mackenzie Elementary School. The job was far from ideal: inconsistent hours, minimal benefits, and pay that barely covered childcare for the twins, but it provided crucial experience and a foot in the door of Detroit's educational system. Walking through the school's worn hallways, Alaya confronted the stark reality of underfunded public education. Peeling paint, outdated textbooks, and a computer lab filled with ancient machines that frequently crashed mid-lesson. The contrast with the private academies serving families like the Wellingtons couldn't have been more pronounced. "We're supposed to prepare them for a digital world with computers from the last century," complained Mr. Hoffman, a veteran 5th-grade teacher, during Alaya's first lunch break in the staff room. "Have you tried any educational apps?" Alaya asked, describing several free programs she'd researched during her studies. "On what devices?" Mr. Hoffman gestured toward the window, where students played in the yard. "Most of these kids don't have computers at home, and the school can barely keep the lights on." The conversation sparked something in Alaya, a problem that needed solving, a gap that needed filling. That evening, after tucking the twins into bed, she pulled out her laptop, a refurbished model Maya had helped her purchase, and began researching low-cost educational technology solutions. At home, Daya and Lena were developing at an astonishing pace. While all parents believed their children exceptional, Alaya's background in education allowed her to recognize truly advanced cognitive patterns. By 3, both girls could count to 50, recognize all letters, and solve simple puzzles designed for children twice their age. "This one different," Lena declared one evening, holding up a puzzle piece with absolute certainty. "Pattern wrong." Alaya examined the piece and realized her daughter had identified a subtle manufacturing error in the pattern that even she hadn't noticed. Daya, meanwhile, had arranged her blocks not in random towers but in a deliberate sequence of ascending sizes. "They process information differently," Maya observed during a weekend visit, watching the twins navigate through a children's game on Alaya's laptop with surprising dexterity. "Have you thought about testing them?" "For what?" Alaya asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Giftedness," Maya replied simply. "My cousin works with accelerated learning programs. This isn't typical development." The possibility both thrilled and terrified Alaya. Educational opportunities for gifted children often came with price tags far beyond her means. Yet she couldn't deny her daughters the chance to develop their potential fully, not after fighting so hard to give them a future. Late that night, after everyone had gone to bed, Aliyah sat at her small kitchen table with her laptop. The ancient desktop computer at Mackenzie Elementary had crashed 3 times that day while she attempted to demonstrate a simple math program to 4th graders. The frustration of those eager young faces turning to disappointment haunted her. On impulse, she opened a blank document and began sketching ideas for a simple educational game, something that could work even on outdated systems, something that would transform basic math exercises into an engaging adventure. As the hours passed, her rough concept evolved into a surprisingly detailed plan. When morning came, Aliyah had completed a rudimentary design document for what she dubbed MathJoy, a simple but engaging program that disguised mathematical concepts as game challenges. She had no idea how to actually build it, but the vision was clear in her mind. Over the next few months, Aliyah's evenings followed a new routine. After the twins were asleep, she taught herself basic programming through free online courses, YouTube tutorials, and programming books borrowed from the library. Progress was painfully slow. Concepts that younger, unencumbered students might grasp in days took her weeks of stolen hours between teaching assignments and parenting responsibilities. "You need sleep more than you need code," Maya scolded, finding Aliyah nodding off over her laptop one Sunday afternoon while the twins napped. "I need both," Aliyah replied stubbornly. "I'm onto something here, Maya, something that could actually help kids like the ones at Mackenzie." By early December, Aliyah had created a functioning prototype of MathJoy, crude and limited, but operational. She installed it on her laptop and introduced it to her most important beta testers, Daya and Lena. "Again!" they demanded after the first session, delighted by the colorful animations and simple challenges that taught basic addition through a treasure hunt narrative. Encouraged by their response, Aliyah refined the program over winter break, adding more levels and improving the primitive graphics. When school resumed in January, she nervously approached her principal about testing the program with struggling math students. "It can't hurt," Mrs. Chambers shrugged, more concerned with the upcoming standardized tests than with a substitute teacher's side project. The first classroom trial exceeded Aliyah's modest expectations. Students who typically disengaged during math lessons remained focused for the entire period, competing eagerly to advance through the game's levels. The following week, 3 other teachers asked if they could try the program with their classes. "You should show this at the district teaching conference," suggested Ms. Rivera, a 4th grade teacher whose struggling students had shown marked improvement after just 2 weeks with MathJoy. "Seriously, Aliyah, this is good work." The Detroit Educational Innovation Fair was a modest gathering of teachers and educational professionals sharing classroom strategies and tools. Aliyah's expectations were minimal as she set up her old laptop at a small table in the corner of the high school gymnasium that hosted the event. "It's very basic," she explained apologetically to the first few teachers who stopped by. "I developed it specifically for outdated systems like the ones we have at Mackenzie." Word spread through the fair with surprising speed. By midday, Aliyah's table was surrounded by teachers eager to see the program that reportedly kept even the most distracted students engaged. Among them was a tall, distinguished-looking man who observed silently from the edge of the group. As the crowd thinned, he approached directly. "Interesting approach to gamification," he commented, extending his hand. Marcus Wilson, former professor of educational technology at University of Michigan, current educational technology investor. Aliyah shook his hand, momentarily speechless. Marcus Wilson was something of a legend in Detroit's educational circles, a former inner-city teacher who had developed a successful educational software company and sold it for millions, only to return to Detroit to invest in local innovation. "Your program addresses exactly the problem most educational software ignores: accessibility on outdated hardware," he continued. "Have you considered scaling this up?" "Honestly, I'm just a substitute teacher who taught herself to code," Aliyah admitted. "Scaling wasn't exactly on my radar. Marcus smiled. Would you have time for coffee after the fair? I'd like to discuss this further. 2 days later, Alaya sat across from Marcus at a small cafe near her apartment, nervously twisting her napkin as he reviewed her crude business proposal, hastily assembled with Maya's help the previous night. Let me be direct, Marcus said, closing his tablet. I have $150,000 that I'm willing to invest if you can develop this into a full-fledged learning platform. Alaya's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. I'm sorry, what? I invest in educational solutions that address real problems, Marcus explained. Your program works on virtually any hardware, engages students effectively, and was designed by someone who understands classroom realities. That's rare. But why invest in a single mother with no business experience? Alaya asked bluntly. Marcus leaned forward. Because you have what can't be bought. You understand what teachers and students actually need, not what Silicon Valley thinks they need. That evening, Alaya paced her small living room, explaining Marcus's offer to Corinne and Maya while the twins played with puzzles on the floor. He wants me to found a company, a real company, she said, still unable to fully process the conversation. He thinks MathJoy could be just the beginning of an educational technology platform designed specifically for underserved schools. This is your chance, Maya said firmly. You've been talking about educational inequality since I met you. Now you can actually do something about it. Later that night, Alaya sat on her bed, scrolling through photos of Daya and Lena on her phone. Their faces, so innocent and full of potential, strengthened her resolve. The risk was enormous, giving up the security of her teaching position for the uncertainty of entrepreneurship. Yet the possibility of creating something truly meaningful, something that could help thousands of children like those at Mackenzie Elementary, was too compelling to ignore. With a deep breath, she opened her email and typed, Mr. Wilson, I accept your proposal. Let's change education together. She hit send before doubt could paralyze her. The following week, in a small rented office space with second-hand furniture, Alaya signed the incorporation documents for Johnson Educational Technologies. With the pen still in her hand, she couldn't possibly predict that in 5 years her small initiative would become a multi-million-dollar powerhouse in the educational sector, attracting the attention of much larger investors, including Wellington Investments. The ink barely dry on Johnson Educational Technologies Incorporation documents, Alaya stared at her signature with a mixture of terror and exhilaration. The small rented office with its second-hand furniture and bare walls seemed simultaneously too small for her dreams and too vast for her experience. So, Maya said, raising a paper cup filled with supermarket sparkling cider, to changing education one algorithm at a time. Alaya clinked her cup against her friend's, to jumping off cliffs and building wings on the way down. 3 years later, that tiny office was but a distant memory. Johnson Educational Technologies, now known simply as JET, occupied the entire 3rd floor of a renovated factory building in Detroit's rapidly revitalizing Midtown district. The MathJoy application, refined and expanded, had found enthusiastic adoption among teachers in underfunded schools throughout Michigan and neighboring states. The district superintendent from Chicago is online too, announced Tara, the receptionist Jet had hired 6 months earlier. And the investors from Horizon Capital sent another email asking to schedule a meeting. Alaya nodded, adjusting her blazer, a recent splurge from an outlet store replacing the threadbare cardigan she'd worn through countless investor pitches. Tell Chicago I'll call back in 20 minutes. The Horizon meeting can wait until next week. In the conference room, Alaya faced 5 serious-faced investors, their polished appearances and crisp portfolios screaming old money and Ivy League credentials. Their interest in Jet's expansion was clear. Early adoption rates of MathJoy had caught the attention of educational technology watchers nationwide. Your product shows promise, said the lead investor, a silver-haired man whose voice carried the distinctive cadence of someone accustomed to being heard. But we have concerns about leadership experience. Educational software is a competitive market, Ms. Johnson. Do you have the business acumen to scale this beyond a regional success? Aliyah felt a familiar tightening in her chest, the same sensation she'd experienced in Nicholas Wellington's office years ago when he'd questioned her worth. She straightened in her chair, meeting the man's evaluating gaze directly. "What I have is something better than an MBA," she replied evenly. "I understand our users intimately. I've taught in the exact schools we serve. I've witnessed firsthand the frustration of children who want to learn but lack the tools. That understanding drives every decision at Jet, and it's something your traditionally credentialed CEOs can't replicate." The room fell silent. Then, unexpectedly, the youngest investor, a woman with sharp eyes and a sharper suit, smiled. "Authentic insight into user experience is indeed invaluable. Let's talk numbers." 2 hours later, Jet had secured its second round of funding, enough to hire 3 more developers and begin expansion into Illinois and Ohio. As the investors departed, Maya re-entered, her expression a mixture of relief and awe. "That was impressive," she said, collapsing into a chair. "Especially the part where you basically told them their MBA fetish was irrelevant." Aliyah laughed, the tension finally leaving her shoulders. "I may have been channeling my inner Eleanor Wellington. The company's growth demanded sacrifice. 18-hour days became Aliyah's norm, her schedule a careful orchestration of development meetings, investor calls, and motherhood. Often, Daya and Lena completed homework in the small break room Aliyah had furnished specifically for their after-school hours. "Mama, look, I finished all my math," 6-year-old Lena announced one evening, proudly displaying a worksheet covered in neat figures. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Aliyah replied, glancing up from budget projections. "Did you help your sister?" "Daya doesn't need help," Lena said matter-of-factly. "She's building a castle with the pattern blocks. It has perfect symmetry." Aliyah followed her daughter's gaze to where Daya sat cross-legged on the floor, methodically arranging geometric shapes into an intricate structure. The precision of her work, unusual for a 6-year-old, sent a familiar pang through Aliyah's heart. Both girls had inherited their father's analytical mind, though they would never know it. That evening, after tucking the twins into bed in their modest but comfortable apartment, Aliyah removed a wooden chess set from the hall closet. She had purchased it at a garage sale months earlier but had hesitated to introduce the game to her daughters, knowing it would awaken memories best left dormant. The polished pieces felt both foreign and familiar in her hands as she arranged them on the board. Chess had been her and Nicholas's ritual, the pretense that had brought them together in the Wellington Mansion's library night after night. She could still recall his voice explaining strategies, his fingers brushing hers as they reset the board, the intellectual intimacy that had eventually led to physical closeness. "This is a silly reason to deprive them," she murmured to herself, running a finger along the carved queen. Her daughters deserved every educational opportunity, regardless of painful associations. The following evening, she set the board on the coffee table after dinner. "Who wants to learn a new game?" she asked. Both girls approached curiously, examining the pieces with careful fingers. "This is chess," Aliyah explained, her voice steadier than she'd expected. "It's a game about strategy and thinking ahead. This game taught me a lot about strategy in life." To her surprise, both twins took to chess with extraordinary enthusiasm. Within weeks, they were playing complete games, their natural aptitude evident in how quickly they grasped complex concepts. By the time they turned 7, Daya and Lena were competing in their school's chess club against children several years older. As the twins flourished, so did Jet. The company's breakthrough came unexpectedly when the superintendent of Detroit Public Schools called personally after witnessing MathJoy's impact in a pilot program. "We want to implement this district-wide," he announced. "Every elementary school, every classroom." The contract, Jet's first 6-figure deal, necessitated expanding the team again. Aliyah hired 5 more employees, including a veteran teacher as educational content director and a skilled developer who accepted a below-market salary because, as he put it, I'd rather build something meaningful than another app that sells people stuff they don't need. Success brought offers of increased salary and perks for Alaya herself, which the board enthusiastically approved. She accepted only a modest raise, redirecting the bulk of the allocated funds back into development. You could afford a much bigger place now, Maya pointed out during a rare evening off as they shared takeout in Alaya's apartment. The girls will be sharing that bedroom forever at this rate. We have enough, Alaya replied, watching the twins playing chess at the coffee table. Jet needs the capital more than I need square footage. The Detroit contract opened doors across Michigan, then neighboring states. By Jet's third anniversary, the company employed 20 people and had moved to larger offices. Alaya, now a recognized name in educational technology circles, found herself invited to speak at conferences and educational summits. When the twins turned 8, they celebrated 3 milestones in 1 month: their birthday, winning their first major chess tournament, and Alaya closing on a modest but charming 3-bedroom house in a good school district, the first home she had ever owned. "This is our home," she told the girls as she unlocked the front door for the first time. "Just ours." The twins raced through the empty rooms, their excited voices echoing off bare walls. Watching them, Alaya felt a completeness she had not expected, a sense that the broken pieces of her life had finally reassembled into something whole and beautiful. That autumn, Alaya was invited to present Jet's educational model to the Michigan State Board of Education. Her presentation, confident, articulate, backed by impressive student improvement statistics, caught the attention of state officials and education reporters alike. The following week, the Detroit Free Press ran a feature. Detroit's startup revolutionizes math education in public schools. Alaya carefully clipped the article, placing it in the same box where she kept the twins' birth certificates and a bank statement showing Jet's first million in revenue. At her desk, surrounded by expansion plans and growth projections, Alaya paused to study a framed photograph of Daya and Lena at their chess tournament, identical grins showcasing missing front teeth as they held their trophies. "We're almost there, girls," she whispered. "Almost there." While contemplating the company's growth chart in her new office, Alaya didn't imagine that Forbes magazine was already preparing an article about education disruptors that would put Jet on Nicholas Wellington's radar, now responsible for the technology investment division of his family company. The growth chart on Alaya's wall told a story of improbable success: 45-degree angles where business experts had predicted gentle slopes, sharp upward turns where investors had cautioned to expect plateaus. 5 years after that terrifying day when she'd signed Jet's incorporation papers, the evidence of her triumph was undeniable, but nothing prepared her for seeing her own face staring back at her from the glossy cover of Forbes magazine. "Ms. Johnson?" Tara's voice came through the intercom. "The photographer from Forbes is here for final approval on the images before publication." Alaya smoothed her blazer, a momentary flutter of nerves interrupting her usual composure. Celebrity had never been her goal, and the attention still felt foreign, uncomfortable. "Send him in," she replied, quickly checking her reflection in the small mirror she kept in her desk drawer. The woman who looked back at her bore little resemblance to the frightened, pregnant assistant who had fled Greenwich in disgrace. Her natural curls, once severely pulled back to look professional in the Wellington household, now framed her face with confident volume. The perpetual exhaustion that had marked her early years of motherhood had given way to a polished glow of success. The photographer, a lanky man with an impressive beard, entered with a tablet in hand. "These are spectacular, Ms. Johnson. The lighting really captured the essence of what you're building here." As Alaya reviewed the photos that would accompany the magazine's feature, "The New Disruptive Force in Educational Technology," she heard the unmistakable sound of 8-year-old feet racing down the hallway. "Mom! Mom!" Daya burst through the door first, her sister a half step behind. "The secretary at school showed us online. The Forbes magazine with you on the cover is coming out next week." Lena nodded emphatically. "She said you're changing how kids learn math forever." The photographer grinned. Sounds like your PR team is already at work. Alaya smoothed Daya's unruly curls, identical to her own. Girls, this is Mr. Sanderson. He took the photos for the article. Both twins straightened immediately, extending their hands with the precise manners Alaya had instilled in them. Pleased to meet you, Mr. Sanderson, they recited in near-perfect unison. After the photographer departed, Alaya studied her daughters with quiet pride. Dressed in their private school uniforms, a luxury Alaya had insisted upon once Jet's success made it possible, they were poised, articulate, and remarkably self-possessed for 8-year-olds. It's just an interview, girls. Nothing extraordinary, she said, downplaying the significance as she always did. Success was to be expected, not celebrated excessively, another lesson she wanted her daughters to internalize. But Mom, the secretary said Jet is worth $340 million now, Lena said, her green-blue eyes wide. That's a lot of zeros. Alaya felt a familiar pang at the sight of those eyes, so distinctly Wellington, though the girls would never know it. Numbers are just numbers, sweetheart. What matters is what we do with them. Maya appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand. The Department of Education contract is official. Implementation in 2,300 low-income schools nationwide over the next 3 years. The twins exchanged excited glances. Does this mean we can get ice cream to celebrate? Daya asked hopefully. After you finish your homework, Alaya replied automatically. Why don't you go set up in the conference room? I need to talk with Aunt Maya. As the girls scampered off, Maya closed the office door. You know what this means, right? We're no longer just a promising startup. We're a major player. Alaya nodded, still processing the implications. The federal contract would increase Jet's valuation substantially and cement its reputation as the leading innovator in accessible educational technology. Also, Maya continued, sliding a cream-colored envelope across the desk. Another TED Talk invitation. This time they're being very insistent. Alaya sighed, adding the envelope to a growing stack of similar invitations. Send the usual response. We're focused on implementation right now. This is the third major speaking engagement you've turned down this year, Maya pointed out. At some point, visibility becomes part of leadership. My visibility is perfectly adequate from Detroit, Alaya countered, gesturing to the Forbes proofs. Maya's expression softened. It's not just work avoidance, is it? It's New York. You're still avoiding New York. The bluntness of the observation caught Alaya off guard. She turned to the window, gazing out at Detroit's skyline, a city that had sheltered her when she had nothing, a place that had given her a second chance. New York has memories I prefer not to revisit, she admitted quietly. You've built all this, Maya said, gesturing to the expansive office with its awards and accolades lining the walls. How long will you keep hiding? I'm not hiding, Alaya protested. I'm choosing my priorities. Before Maya could respond, Tara's voice came through the intercom again. Ms. Johnson, the girls wanted me to tell you they won another chess tournament at school. They beat high school seniors. Alaya's face softened immediately. Tell them I'll be right there. In the conference room, Daya and Lena sat on opposite sides of a chessboard, deep in concentration. Their talent for the game had progressed from impressive to extraordinary over the past year. They regularly competed in regional tournaments, often against players twice their age. We won all our matches, Mom, Daya announced proudly as Alaya entered. The high school coach wants us to join their practice sessions. That's wonderful, girls, Alaya said, genuine pride warming her voice. But remember, balance is important, the twins finished in unison, having heard the mantra countless times. Later that evening, after the promised ice cream and a quiet dinner at home, Alaya sat at her kitchen table reviewing correspondence while the girls completed homework nearby. A heavy envelope with an embossed seal caught her attention, different from the usual corporate communications. The National Education Foundation cordially invites you to be the keynote speaker at our annual Educational Innovation Symposium, she read aloud, scanning the elegant letterhead. Where is it, Mom? Lena asked without looking up from her math worksheet. Alaya hesitated before answering. New York. Both girls' heads snapped up simultaneously. Can we go? Daya asked excitedly. We've never been to New York. I haven't decided yet, Alaya hedged, continuing to read. Her pulse quickened as she reached the second page. They're also organizing a charitable chess tournament to raise funds for public schools. A chess tournament in New York? Lena's eyes widened. Mom, we have to go. The following morning, Maya found Alaya researching the symposium on her computer. So, the National Education Foundation event, she said, leaning against the doorframe. It's the biggest platform possible for our mission. I know, Alaya admitted, and the girls are desperate to participate in the chess tournament. It's been 8 years, Alaya, Maya said gently. You've built an empire worth hundreds of millions. You have brilliant, beautiful daughters. You've won by every possible measure. Isn't it time to stop running? Alaya stared at the invitation, tracing the embossed logo with her fingertip. The thought of returning to New York, of potentially crossing paths with the Wellingtons, had been her private nightmare for years. Yet Maya was right. How long would she allow fear to dictate her choices? You're right, she said finally. It's time to stop running. With newfound resolve, Alaya picked up her phone. Tara, please book 3 rooms at the Four Seasons in Manhattan for the week of the Education Foundation Symposium, and register Daya and Lena for the chess tournament. What Alaya couldn't know was that across the internet, on a financial news site she never frequented, a headline had just been published. Wellington Foundation announces $5 million sponsorship for National Education Symposium. The accompanying photo showed Nicholas Wellington III, recently appointed CEO following his father's health-related retirement, shaking hands with the foundation's director. That evening, as Alaya helped the girls pack chess books for their upcoming tournament practice, she felt a strange sense of destiny. New York is a big city, she told herself. The chances of running into anyone from my past are infinitesimal. While preparing the girls for their trip to New York, Alaya didn't know that in the same city, Nicholas Wellington III, recently named CEO of the family's financial empire, was carefully examining a report about Jet, circling the founder's name with renewed interest. Nicholas Wellington III tapped his Mont Blanc pen against the Jet financial report, his gaze lingering on the circled name. Alaya Johnson. The woman who had disappeared 8 years ago was now gracing the cover of Forbes magazine. A strange sensation, something between curiosity and unease, settled in his stomach as he closed the file and turned to the window of his penthouse office overlooking Manhattan. Meanwhile, 1,000 miles away, Alaya stood in her bedroom in Detroit, carefully folding a crimson silk blouse into her suitcase. The thought of returning to New York after 8 years sent a current of anxiety through her body. She paused, hands trembling slightly, and took a deep breath. It's just a city, she whispered to herself. Just buildings and streets. They don't own it. The twins burst into her room, their matching suitcases already packed. Mom, are you ready yet? The car will be here in 30 minutes. Daya's excitement was palpable as she bounced on the balls of her feet. Almost ready, sweetheart, Alaya replied, tucking her favorite pearl necklace, her one extravagance after Jet's first million, into a velvet pouch. Did you pack your chess books? All of them, Lena confirmed solemnly, and our tournament score sheets for practice. 3 hours later, their plane touched down at LaGuardia Airport. As the Manhattan skyline came into view during the taxi ride, Alaya felt her chest tighten. The last time she'd seen those buildings, she'd been pregnant, terrified, and utterly alone. Look at those skyscrapers! Daya pressed her face against the window. They're like giant chess pieces. Lena, always more observant of her mother's moods, reached for Alaya's hand. Are you okay, Mom? You look sad. Alaya squeezed her daughter's hand. Not sad, sweetheart. Just remembering. I lived here a long time ago before you were born. Did you like it? Lena asked. After a moment's hesitation, Alaya answered carefully. I learned a lot here. Important lessons. The Four Seasons welcomed them with the deference reserved for distinguished guests. The receptionist's eyes widened slightly in recognition as Alaya presented her identification. Ms. Johnson, welcome to the Four Seasons. We're honored to have you and your daughters with us. You've been upgraded to our Park Avenue suite. As they entered the luxurious suite, Daya gasped in delight. Mom, this is bigger than our entire house. Alaya smiled despite herself. The irony wasn't lost on her. The last time she'd been in New York, she'd shared a dingy apartment with two strangers, sleeping on a pull-out couch. Now she stood in a suite that cost more per night than her monthly rent had been then. Walking to the window, Alaya gazed out at the Manhattan skyline. The empire of steel and glass that had once intimidated her now seemed smaller, less imposing. She was no longer the frightened young woman desperate for approval. She was Alaya Johnson, CEO of a company valued at nearly $500 million, mother to two extraordinary daughters, a woman who had rebuilt herself from ashes. First thing tomorrow, I'd like to show you both some special places, she told the girls as they explored the suite in wonder. The Statue of Liberty, for starters. What does it represent, Mom? Lena asked, always curious about the deeper meaning of things. Alaya's expression softened. Freedom. New beginnings. The promise that anyone with determination can build something meaningful. The following day, they joined the ferry to Liberty Island. As the statue came into view, Alaya felt an unexpected surge of emotion. 8 years ago, she had been at her lowest point, abandoned, pregnant, struggling to survive. Now she returned triumphant with her daughters beside her. It's so big! Daya exclaimed, taking photos with the camera Alaya had given her for their last birthday. Freedom is a big idea, Alaya replied, and sometimes we have to fight for it. Their tour of Manhattan continued through Times Square, where Alaya held the twins' hands with almost desperate tightness. The crowds and noise triggered flashbacks, walking these same streets in a waitress uniform, exhausted from double shifts, nauseated from early pregnancy. Mom, you're squeezing too hard, Daya complained, pulling Alaya back to the present. Sorry, sweetheart. She loosened her grip, forcing a smile. Just don't want to lose you in the crowd. That evening, while the girls slept in their adjoining room, Alaya worked on her keynote address. The speech needed to be perfect, a manifesto on how technology could democratize quality education, backed by JET's impressive metrics on student improvement in underprivileged schools. Technology is the great equalizer, she typed, then paused, reflecting on the layers of meaning in that phrase. Technology had equalized the playing field for her, allowing a single mother from Detroit to compete with, and surpass, established educational companies run by men with Ivy League MBAs and family connections. Across town, in the Wellington Tower, Nicholas sat in his expansive office reviewing documents for the National Education Foundation event. His father's declining health had accelerated his ascension to CEO, a role he'd been groomed for since childhood but had assumed with unexpected reluctance. The keynote speaker from the Johnson Educational Technologies has impressive growth metrics, he mused, scanning the briefing without registering the founder's name. His assistant had provided only company highlights and financial projections. The office door opened as Eleanor Wellington entered, elegant as ever at 73. Nicholas, Victoria is selecting the floral arrangements for the symposium. Finally, a suitable bride. Nicholas nodded absently. Victoria Astor, his fiancée of 6 months, came from exactly the kind of family the Wellingtons considered appropriate. Old money, proper pedigree, the right connections. The engagement had pleased everyone, particularly his mother, though Nicholas himself felt a curious detachment from the whole affair. Are you listening, Nicholas? Eleanor's sharp tone cut through his distraction. Sorry, Mother, just reviewing the foundation event details. Eleanor waved dismissively. "I care little about the specifics. What matters is the Wellington Foundation's visibility. $5 million should ensure we're prominently featured." The following day, Aliyah took the twins to the Strand bookstore, their requested destination after learning it housed 18 miles of books. As the girls explored the children's section, Aliyah browsed titles on women pioneers, selecting biographies of Katherine Johnson, Grace Hopper, and other groundbreaking women in STEM fields. "These are for you," she told the twins when they reunited, "women who changed the world through intelligence and perseverance." Leaving the bookstore, they turned onto Fifth Avenue. Aliyah froze mid-step, her heart lurching painfully. Across the street, emerging from a luxury boutique, was the unmistakable figure of Eleanor Wellington. Without thinking, Aliyah pulled the girls behind a store display, her pulse racing as Eleanor passed by, engaged in conversation with a saleswoman carrying multiple shopping bags. "Mom, why are we hiding?" Lena asked, confused by her mother's sudden tension. Aliyah watched Eleanor's retreating form, the familiar aristocratic posture sending her back in time to that terrible morning in the Wellington mansion. Taking a deep breath, she straightened her shoulders and stepped back onto the sidewalk. "We're not hiding, sweetheart," she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "We never need to hide again." That evening, as Aliyah adjusted her red dress for the opening reception, a sense of calm resolve settled over her. The dress, Maya's insistence that she dress to kill, fit perfectly, accentuating the confidence that came from creating something meaningful from nothing. "You look like a queen, Mom," Daya said admiringly, sitting on the hotel bed in her new blue dress. "A warrior queen," Lena added, "like Nzinga of Angola we studied in history class." Aliyah smiled at her daughters, so wise beyond their years. "Ready to show New York what the Johnsons are made of?" As she applied her lipstick, making final adjustments to her appearance, Aliyah studied her reflection. The frightened assistant who had once scurried through the Wellington mansion was gone. In her place stood a woman who had faced abandonment, poverty, and prejudice, and emerged victorious. "Time to go, girls," she said, picking up her clutch. "Remember, heads high, shoulders back." That night, while adjusting her red dress for the opening reception, Aliyah didn't imagine that in less than an hour she would be face to face with the man who had destroyed her world and the woman who had tried to buy her silence about her daughters. The Mandarin Oriental's grand ballroom glittered with calculated opulence. Crystal chandeliers cast refractions across the polished marble floors where Manhattan's educational and financial elite mingled, champagne flutes in hand. Aliyah stood at the entrance for a brief moment, absorbing the scene with her daughter's hands firmly in hers. The crimson dress hugged her figure perfectly, a statement of both confidence and defiance. "Remember, girls, behavior impeccable, smiles polite, and no competing with each other before the tournament," she instructed, giving their hands a gentle squeeze. "Yes, Mom," they replied in unison, their green-blue eyes, so painfully reminiscent of their father, sparkling with excitement. As they moved into the crowd, Aliyah felt the subtle shift in energy. Heads turned, conversations paused, eyes assessed. The CEO of education's most talked-about company, accompanied by identical twins whose poise belied their age, created a natural focal point. "Ms. Johnson, what an honor!" The foundation's assistant director approached, hand extended. "Your work with underprivileged schools is revolutionizing educational outcomes. Everyone's eager to hear your keynote tomorrow." Aliyah smiled with practiced warmth. "The honor is mine. The Foundation's commitment to educational equity aligns perfectly with JET's mission." As the conversation continued, Maya scanned the room with the protective vigilance of a longtime friend. Her posture suddenly stiffened, eyes fixed on a point across the ballroom. "What is it?" Aliyah asked, noticing the change. Maya's voice dropped to a whisper. 3 o'clock, by the ice sculpture. It's him. Alaya followed her gaze, and the world seemed to slow. Nicholas Wellington III stood in profile, champagne in hand, engaging with a small circle of admirers. His dark suit was impeccably tailored, silver temples adding distinguished gravity to features that remained unchanged in their aristocratic arrogance. Beside him stood a willowy blonde whose diamond engagement ring caught the light with every gesture, a vaguely familiar face from some society page Alaya had likely glimpsed during her time in the Wellington household. "It's him, isn't it?" Maya murmured, watching Alaya closely. Alaya merely nodded, momentarily robbed of speech by the visceral wave of memories. The library chess games, the whispered promises, the cruel dismissal, the rain soaking through her clothes as she stood outside the motel. "We can leave. Invent an excuse." "Number." Alaya's voice emerged stronger than she expected. "We won't run. Not anymore." At that moment, the Foundation's director took the stage, tapping the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker for tonight, a true revolutionary in educational technology, Alaya Johnson, founder and CEO of Johnson Educational Technologies." Applause rippled through the ballroom as Alaya moved toward the stage. She felt rather than saw the exact moment Nicholas recognized her, the physical jolt as his champagne glass froze midway to his lips, the widening of those familiar blue-green eyes as disbelief transformed his features. With perfect composure, Alaya delivered her brief opening remarks about educational equality, accessible technology, and JET's mission to transform American public education. She spoke of growing up in the Bronx, of earning her Harvard scholarship, of building a company valued at nearly $500 million from nothing. "When people say that individuals like me, from where I come from, cannot lead innovation or build global companies, I answer with results," she stated, looking directly at Nicholas for the first time. "When they say we lack sufficient pedigree, we respond with unwavering excellence." The ballroom erupted in applause. Nicholas remained motionless, his face a mask of incredulity. After concluding her remarks, Alaya graciously accepted congratulations from a stream of admirers. From the corner of her eye, she saw the Foundation's director approaching with Nicholas and his companion in tow. "Ms. Johnson, allow me to introduce our primary sponsor this year, Nicholas Wellington III, CEO of Wellington Investments, and his fiancée, Victoria Astor." "Mr. Wellington." Alaya extended her hand with a glacial smile. "How interesting to finally meet you." Nicholas appeared to have seen a ghost. "Alaya, it's a pleasure to see you again. You look different." "You know each other?" Victoria asked, confusion evident in her perfectly sculpted features. "Ms. Johnson worked briefly for my family many years ago," Nicholas answered mechanically, "before her current career." "Mom!" Daya and Lena approached eagerly. "The tournament is about to start." Nicholas froze as he beheld the twins. The shock on his face was unmistakable as he stared into eyes identical to his own, set in faces that were miniature versions of Alaya. "Your daughters are adorable," Victoria commented, "and I hear they're quite talented at chess." "Extremely talented," Alaya confirmed. "Girls, this is Mr. Wellington, one of the event's sponsors, and his fiancée." "Pleased to meet you," the twins said politely, oblivious to the emotional earthquake they were causing. How old are they?" Nicholas stammered. 8, Alaya replied nonchalantly. "Come along, girls, the tournament is starting." For the next 2 hours, Nicholas watched, transfixed, as the twins methodically defeated opponents much older than themselves. Their playing style, aggressive, calculating, with unexpected openings, was eerily familiar. The pivotal moment came when Daya, in the semi-final, executed a sequence of moves that Nicholas instantly recognized: the Wellington opening, a variation he himself had created and shown only to Alaya during their nights in the library. "Impressive move," he commented, approaching after the match. Where did you learn that specific opening? Dia looked at him with innocent eyes that were perfect replicas of his own. Our mom taught us. She says every move in chess tells a story. And what story does that particular opening tell? He pressed, his voice nearly failing. It was Lena who answered, that even the most powerful king on the board eventually faces his checkmate. At that moment, Eleanor Wellington, now 73 but still formidable, approached. Nicholas, we need to discuss the announcement of the My God. The Wellington matriarch stared at the twins, then at Alaya, and finally at her son. Her champagne slipped from her fingers, shattering on the marble floor. The silence that followed was broken by Maya, who approached protectively. Ms. Johnson, the MIT representatives are eager to discuss implementing the program in Boston schools. Certainly, Alaya responded calmly. Girls, stay with Aunt Maya for a moment. When the children moved away, Alaya faced Nicholas and Eleanor. Yes, they're your granddaughters, Eleanor. And your daughters, Nicholas. The same ones you paid me to solve 8 years ago. Why didn't you ever tell me? Nicholas whispered. Tell you what? That the children you called problems survived? That the domestic without pedigree built a company valued at more than half what Wellington Investments is worth today? You made your intentions perfectly clear that day. Victoria Astor, finally comprehending the situation, discreetly withdrew, her 4-carat engagement ring glinting as she disappeared into the crowd. Can we talk privately? Nicholas implored. We have nothing to discuss. My daughters don't know your name, don't carry your surname, and have grown up without missing you for a single day. I have rights. Rights? Alaya's voice rose slightly, attracting glances. What rights would the man who called me a worthless domestic and expelled me pregnant from his house have? What rights would the privileged heir who watched his mother offer me money to abort his own children without saying a word in my defense claim? Eleanor, recovering from her shock, intervened. This is not the place for this kind of discussion. We can resolve this in a civilized manner. There's nothing to resolve, Mrs. Wellington. Your granddaughters are Johnsons. They attend the best schools, have a millionaire college fund, and are growing up knowing their worth in the world. They need nothing from you. As she walked away, Alaya added, By the way, the Wellington opening that Dia executed, I renamed it the Johnson opening years ago, just as I renamed everything else in my life that once carried your mark. While the social elite around them pretended not to notice the charged exchange, Eleanor's face hardened into the familiar mask of calculated control. This isn't over, she murmured, too quietly for anyone but Alaya to hear. Oh, but it is, Alaya replied with equal softness. It was over the moment you had me escorted from your house. Later that night, in her hotel suite, Alaya gazed out at the Manhattan skyline, her victory both sweeter and more complex than she had imagined. The twins slept peacefully in the adjoining room, unaware of the seismic shift in their family history. Her phone buzzed with a text from Maya. Victoria Astor seen leaving hotel alone, ring finger conspicuously bare. Alaya closed her eyes, processing the collision of past and present. She hadn't come seeking destruction or revenge, merely recognition of her worth. Yet she couldn't deny the satisfaction of watching Nicholas's carefully constructed world begin to unravel. While the social media buzz about her keynote speech continued to grow, Alaya couldn't predict that the photo of her embracing her daughters would circulate rapidly online, nor that the true confrontation would happen not in the elegant halls of the symposium, but at the chess tables of the charity tournament, where past and present would collide in an emotional checkmate. The image of Alaya and her daughters circulated rapidly across social media overnight, framed by countless comments praising the education disruptor and her prodigious children. Meanwhile, Nicholas Wellington paced the length of his hotel suite, sleepless and haunted by the encounter. The bottle of Macallan 25 on the side table had been full when the evening began. Now it stood nearly empty, doing nothing to ease the turmoil in his mind. "You haven't slept," Victoria stated from the doorway, already dressed impeccably despite the early hour. Her tone was flat, devoid of the warmth that had characterized their relationship for the past 11 months. Nicholas turned, his normally perfect appearance disheveled, tie loosened, hair mussed from running his fingers through it repeatedly. "Victoria, I can explain." "Explain what exactly? That you have 8-year-old twin daughters you never mentioned? That you abandoned their pregnant mother? Or that you watched your mother try to buy her silence?" Victoria's voice remained controlled, but ice had replaced the honey. "I've spent the night connecting dots, Nicholas. It's not a flattering picture. It was before I met you. I was younger, more easily influenced by my parents," he attempted, the words sounding hollow even to his own ears. Victoria slipped her engagement ring, a 4-carat Wellington family heirloom, from her finger and placed it on the coffee table with a soft click that somehow echoed louder than a shout. "I come from the same world you do, Nicholas. I understand family pressure and expectations. What I cannot understand or accept is cruelty." "Victoria, please. I've already had my things moved to another suite. I'll make the appropriate announcements regarding our separation." She moved toward the door, then paused. "Those little girls have your eyes, you know, exactly your eyes. How could you not see yourself in them immediately? How could you abandon them before they even took their first breath?" The door closed with quiet finality behind her, leaving Nicholas alone with questions he had no adequate answers for. He reached for his phone, scrolling through overnight notifications until he found what he sought: a press release about the day's symposium events, including Aliyah Johnson's keynote address at 10 o'clock. Across the hotel, Aliyah sat at the desk in her suite, reviewing her presentation one final time. The twins ate breakfast on the balcony, supervised by Maya, their excited chatter about the chess tournament floating through the open door. "You've got this," Maya assured her, stepping inside. "Your speech is perfect, your data is impeccable, and after last night, everyone will be hanging on your every word." Aliyah nodded, smoothing the lapel of her tailored navy suit. "It's not the speech I'm concerned about. Nicholas and Eleanor. They won't let this go easily." Maya's expression hardened. "Let them try something. The court of public opinion is firmly on the side of the brilliant single mother who built an educational empire while raising prodigy daughters, not the billionaire who abandoned his pregnant girlfriend." The hotel's restaurant buzzed with morning activity as various symposium attendees gathered for breakfast. Aliyah guided the twins to a quiet corner table, hyper-aware of every entrance, every movement in her peripheral vision. Halfway through their meal, she sensed a presence approaching and looked up to find Nicholas hovering uncertainly several feet away. Maya immediately stepped between them like a shield. "The girls are eating breakfast, Mr. Wellington. Whatever you have to say can wait." Nicholas's eyes moved past Maya to the twins, who observed the interaction with curious expressions. "I just wanted to wish them luck in today's tournament rounds," he said, his voice strained. "Mom, why does that man keep looking at us?" Daya asked, loud enough for Nicholas to hear. The question hung in the air, loaded with implications that made Nicholas visibly flinch. Aliyah placed her napkin beside her plate and stood. "Girls, finish your breakfast with Aunt Maya. I'll be right back." She guided Nicholas to a semi-private alcove near the restaurant entrance, maintaining professional distance. "Whatever you're planning to say, make it quick. I have a keynote to deliver in 90 minutes. "I couldn't sleep," he began, the dark circles under his eyes confirming his statement. "I kept seeing their faces. They're so clearly—" "Yours?" Aliyah finished, her voice cool. "Yes, they inherited your eyes, a fact I'm reminded of every day of their lives." "Why didn't you tell me they survived? That you kept them?" Aliyah stared at him, incredulous. "Tell you? After you called me a domestic without pedigree? After you watched your mother offer me money to solve the problem? What exactly should I have told you, Nicholas? I had a right to know." "Rights are earned," she replied, each word precise as a chess move. "You forfeited any rights to those girls the moment you chose your family's reputation over their lives." Before Nicholas could respond, Eleanor Wellington appeared, immaculately dressed despite the early hour. "Nicholas, a word before the symposium begins." Her eyes flickered briefly to Alaya, the glint of calculation unmistakable. "Ms. Johnson, your success is quite remarkable. Perhaps we could discuss certain arrangements privately." "There are no arrangements to discuss, Mrs. Wellington," Alaya replied, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "That time has passed." She returned to her daughters, feeling Eleanor's gaze boring into her back like a physical weight. At precisely 10 o'clock, Alaya took the stage in the symposium's grand hall. Hundreds of educators, investors, and policymakers filled the audience. She spotted Nicholas and Eleanor in the front row, Victoria conspicuously absent from the seat reserved beside them. "Technology has the power to democratize quality education," Alaya began, her voice steady and commanding, "but only when designed with genuine understanding of the challenges facing our most vulnerable students." Her presentation flowed seamlessly through JET's remarkable growth statistics, student improvement metrics, and implementation strategies. The audience remained rapt as she shifted subtly from professional to personal. "When I founded JET, many told me it was impossible," she continued, "that someone with my background lacked the necessary pedigree for success in technology or education reform." Nicholas shifted uncomfortably in his seat, recognizing his own cruel words echoed back to him in this public forum. "I was told explicitly that certain doors would remain closed to someone from where I came from, that certain tables weren't meant for people who looked like me or spoke like me." Alaya's gaze swept the audience, briefly meeting Nicholas's troubled eyes. "But as I teach my daughters, in chess as in life, sometimes losing an important piece is merely the beginning of a winning strategy." Eleanor's face remained impassive, though her knuckles whitened around her program. "JET's success proves that excellence recognizes no zip code, no color, no social origin," Alaya concluded. "Our mission is ensuring every child, regardless of circumstance, has access to educational tools that recognize and nurture their potential greatness." The applause was thunderous. As Alaya stepped down from the podium, she was immediately surrounded by admirers and potential partners. The twins rushed forward, embracing her in a three-way hug that photographers eagerly captured. "You were amazing, Mom," Lena exclaimed. "The best speaker ever," Daya agreed, beaming. Eleanor Wellington approached as the crowd thinned, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Impressive presentation. Perhaps now we could discuss a suitable arrangement for everyone's benefit." Alaya's response was clear and deliberate, pitched to Carrie. "There are no arrangements to make, Mrs. Wellington. That time has passed." From several feet away, Victoria observed the exchange with newfound clarity. With quiet determination, she removed her engagement ring and placed it on Nicholas's program folder before slipping from the room. As photographers continued capturing images of Alaya with her daughters, no one could predict that the true confrontation would occur not in the elegant symposium halls, but at the chess tables of the charity tournament, where past and present would collide in an emotional checkmate. The excitement surrounding Alaya's keynote address gradually transitioned into anticipation for the afternoon's charity chess tournament. The hotel's grand ballroom had been transformed. Dozens of chess tables arranged in neat rows, tournament brackets displayed on digital screens, beneficiaries from underfunded public schools seated in a special viewing section. For many of these children, this represented their first glimpse into the world of competitive chess at this level. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the National Education Foundation's Charity Chess Tournament," announced the event coordinator. "All proceeds will support chess programs in underserved schools nationwide. We have participants ranging from elementary school students to international masters, including some special guests." Alaya watched from the sidelines as Daya and Lena took their places at separate tables, their matching blue dresses and perfect posture drawing curious glances from other competitors. At 8 years old, they were among the youngest participants, yet their confident demeanor suggested they belonged. They look so small sitting at those tournament tables, Maya remarked, standing beside Alaya. They may be small, but they've been preparing for this their entire lives, Alaya replied, the double meaning clear only to herself and Maya. Across the room, Nicholas Wellington made his entrance, having changed into a fresh suit after the morning's symposium. The announcer's voice rang out, "We're honored to welcome Nicholas Wellington III, CEO of Wellington Investments and championship-level chess player, as our special guest competitor today." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Few outside elite chess circles knew of Nicholas's talent for the game. It was his private passion, not something he publicized in his corporate life. "Did you know he played?" Maya whispered. "Of course," Alaya answered quietly. "Chess was our connection before everything else." The first round began with the distinctive click of tournament clocks. Daya and Lena dispatched their initial opponents, middle school chess club champions, with clinical efficiency, their small fingers moving pieces with decisive purpose. Nicholas, at a table near the center of the room, similarly defeated his first opponent, a retired mathematics professor. By the third round, a pattern emerged that spectators couldn't help but notice. The Wellington twins, though no one but Alaya, Maya, Nicholas, and Eleanor knew they were Wellington by blood, played with a distinctive aggressive style, prioritizing control of the center board while setting elaborate traps several moves ahead. It was a strategy eerily similar to Nicholas's own approach. "They play like him," Maya observed after Lena's third victory. "It's uncanny." "They play like me," Alaya corrected firmly. "I taught them everything they know." The semi-final pairings were announced, sending a jolt through the room. Board 1, Daya Johnson versus Nicholas Wellington. Eleanor, who had been observing from a discreet distance, suddenly moved closer to the main table. Alaya felt her heart racing as her daughter sat across from her father, neither aware of their true connection. "Good luck, Mr. Wellington," Daya said politely as they shook hands before the match. Nicholas stared at the child's face, a perfect blend of Alaya's features and his own eyes looking back at him. "Thank you, Daya. I have a feeling I'll need it." The game began with Nicholas playing white, opening with his signature sequence, the same variation he had taught Alaya during their late-night sessions in the Wellington Library. To his astonishment, Daya responded with the perfect counter-strategy, her small fingers confidently repositioning pieces as though she had played against this opening 100 times before. 20 minutes into the game, Daya executed a stunning sequence, the distinctive Wellington opening that Nicholas had developed himself, a variation he had shared with only one person in his life. Nicholas froze, his hand hovering above the board. The audience, sensing something significant, leaned forward collectively. "Where did you learn that opening?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Daya looked up with innocent eyes. "Our mom taught us. She says every move in chess tells a story." Nicholas glanced toward Alaya, who stood expressionless at the edge of the crowd. "And what story does that particular opening tell?" he pressed, struggling to maintain composure. It was Lena who answered, having approached to watch her sister's match. "That even the most powerful king on the board eventually faces his checkmate." The profound simplicity of the child's response visibly shook Nicholas. His concentration faltered, leading to a series of minor mistakes that an opponent of Daya's caliber ruthlessly exploited. 15 moves later, she announced quietly, "Checkmate in 3. Nicholas examined the board, finding no escape from the elegant trap his daughter had constructed. He tipped his king in resignation, extending his hand. "Exceptional play. You have a remarkable talent." "Thank you," Daya replied with a smile that was entirely Alaya's. "Mom says talent is just the beginning. Hard work is what matters." As the audience applauded, Nicholas made his way directly to Alaya, his expression a complex mixture of awe and distress. "Please," he said quietly, 5 minutes, in private." Alaya hesitated, then nodded toward a small anteroom off the main hall. "Maya, watch the girls," she instructed before following Nicholas. Once the door closed behind them, Nicholas turned to face her. His carefully maintained composure cracked, revealing raw emotion beneath. "Why didn't you tell me?" he demanded, his voice breaking. "They're my daughters." Alaya's calm demeanor contrasted sharply with his agitation. "What rights would the man who called me a domestic without value and expelled me pregnant from his house have? What rights would the privileged heir who watched his mother offer me money to abort his own children without saying a word in my defense claim?" Nicholas flinched as though physically struck. "I was wrong, terribly, unforgivably wrong. But they're still my children." "No, Nicholas, they're my children," Alaya replied, steel beneath her measured tone. "I endured 42 hours of labor to bring them into this world. I worked 3 jobs simultaneously while studying to secure their future. I rocked them through colic, witnessed every first step, every word, every achievement. What did you contribute beyond DNA? I can compensate them, give them the Wellington name, their rightful inheritance." "They don't need your compensation," Alaya cut him off. "They have the Johnson name. They attend elite private schools. They have a 7-figure college fund. They know their worth in this world." The door opened unexpectedly as Eleanor Wellington entered, her aristocratic features tightened with displeasure. "This conversation requires discretion," she stated. "Family matters should be handled privately." Alaya turned toward the matriarch who had once ordered her removed from the Wellington estate. "We are not family, Mrs. Wellington. You made that abundantly clear 8 years ago." "Circumstances change," Eleanor replied smoothly. "Those girls are Wellingtons, regardless of what name they currently use." "Those girls," Alaya said, her voice rising slightly, "are the same ones you referred to as a problem to be solved with $50,000. The same children you wanted erased to preserve your family's precious reputation." Nicholas stepped between them. "Mother, please, this isn't helping." "I'm merely suggesting a civilized approach," Eleanor insisted. "Financial arrangements, appropriate introductions over time." "Arrangements?" Alaya laughed, the sound devoid of humor. "Did you suggest arrangements when you had security escort me out in the rain? Did you consider civilized approaches when you handed me an envelope full of cash to abort your grandchildren?" Eleanor's composed mask slipped momentarily. "You will lower your voice. This is hardly the venue." "Why?" Alaya challenged. "Afraid someone might overhear how the illustrious Wellingtons treat inconvenient pregnancies? How the great Nicholas Wellington abandoned his own children before birth?" Their confrontation had drawn attention. Through the partially open door, several tournament attendees paused, straining to overhear. Victoria Astor stood among them, her expression hardening as Eleanor's words confirmed her worst suspicions. "This discussion is over," Alaya declared, moving toward the door. "My daughters are waiting for me." "This is far from over," Nicholas responded, desperation evident in his voice. "I want to know them. I have that right." Alaya turned back one last time. "Rights are earned, Nicholas. And you have earned nothing where my daughters are concerned." As she returned to the tournament hall, Maya met her with worried eyes. "Everything okay?" "Everything's fine," Alaya assured her, straightening her shoulders. "Where are the girls?" "Lena's starting her semi-final match. Daya's with her." Watching her daughter calmly demolish another opponent, Alaya felt a complex mixture of emotions. Pride in the extraordinary girls she'd raised, vindication at Nicholas's visible distress upon recognizing what he'd thrown away, and beneath it all, a surprising sense of release. The burden of secrets finally lifted. Victoria Astor approached Nicholas as he returned to the main hall, removing her engagement ring with deliberate slowness. "I've made my decision," she said simply, placing the ring in his palm before walking away. While the twins advanced to the finals of the tournament, no one could have predicted that the following morning would bring Nicholas to Alaya's hotel suite with a desperate final attempt to enter the lives of the daughters he had never known. a proposal that would test the limits of her own capacity to forgive. Dawn broke over Manhattan, painting the sky in hues of amber and gold as Alaya methodically packed her suitcase. The twins' tournament trophies, they had faced each other in the finals, with Daya narrowly defeating her sister, sat on the hotel dresser, gleaming in the early morning light. The previous day's confrontations had left her emotionally drained but strangely liberated, as though 8 years of carried weight had finally been set down. "Are you sure we have to leave today?" Daya asked, watching her mother fold a silk blouse with practiced precision. "I wanted to visit the chess club in Central Park." "We have our flight at 3, Alaya replied gently. "Jet needs its CEO back in Detroit, and you two have school tomorrow." Maya entered from the adjoining room, tablet in hand. "The car will be here in an hour. I've already checked us in for the flight." The hotel phone rang, its sharp trill cutting through the peaceful morning routine. Alaya exchanged a knowing glance with Maya before answering. "Ms. Johnson, I apologize for the early call." The receptionist's voice was professionally apologetic. "Mr. Wellington is in the lobby, insisting on seeing you. He says it's urgent." Alaya closed her eyes briefly, unsurprised, yet still unsettled. "Tell Mr. Wellington that we're preparing to depart." "He's quite persistent, Ms. Johnson. He says he won't leave until he speaks with you." After a moment's consideration, Alaya made her decision. "Send him up in 15 minutes, and please have security available if needed." Maya's eyebrows rose. "You're actually going to see him?" "One final conversation," Alaya said, her voice steady, "to end this chapter completely." She turned to her daughters, who had paused their packing to listen. "Girls, Maya will take you down to breakfast in the restaurant. I have one last meeting." "Business on Sunday morning?" Lena asked skeptically, her perceptive eyes, so like Nicholas's, studying her mother's face. "Something like that," Alaya smiled reassuringly. "I'll join you before we leave." When the girls had departed with Maya, Alaya stood at the suite's window, gathering her thoughts. The Manhattan skyline spread before her, a landscape that had once represented her greatest pain now transformed into the backdrop of her most public triumph. The knock came precisely 15 minutes later. Alaya opened the door to find Nicholas Wellington looking utterly unlike the polished CEO of Wellington Investments. His normally immaculate appearance had deteriorated dramatically, his suit wrinkled as though slept in, stubble shadowing his jaw, eyes reddened from what appeared to be a sleepless night. "5 minutes," Alaya said, stepping aside to allow him entry. "That's all I can give you." Nicholas walked into the suite, his movements lacking their usual confidence. He clutched a leather portfolio in one hand, knuckles white with tension. "Victoria canceled our engagement publicly," he stated without preamble. "She cited revelations incompatible with our future in the statement her publicist released an hour ago." "I'm sorry for your personal difficulties," Alaya replied neutrally, maintaining a careful distance, "though I fail to see how they concern me." Nicholas looked around the elegant suite, his gaze lingering on the twins' chess trophies. "They're extraordinary," he said softly. "Absolutely extraordinary." "They are," Alaya agreed, pride evident in her voice despite her controlled demeanor. "I've prepared these," Nicholas said abruptly, opening the portfolio and extracting several documents. "A trust fund for each of them. Wellington Investments shares. Formal recognition of paternity." Alaya took the papers, scanning them briefly before handing them back. "I'm not interested." "It's substantial money, Alaya." Jet closed its last quarter with a market value of $478 million. I own 67% of the shares. Do the math, Nicholas. He paled visibly, the magnitude of her fortune finally registering. In that moment, Nicholas Wellington III, heir to one of America's greatest financial dynasties, realized that the woman he had once dismissed as a domestic without pedigree now controlled wealth that rivaled his own personal fortune. "What can I do then?" he asked, his voice hollow. There must be something. Alaya studied the broken man before her, so different from the arrogant heir who had shattered her world 8 years ago. Nothing. Daya and Lena are 8 years old. They've lived their entire lives believing their father was dead, a merciful lie I told to spare them the truth that they were rejected. Introducing you now, as a rich stranger trying to buy their affection? What good would that do? They deserve to know the truth. The truth? Alaya laughed without humor. The truth is that you called them problems before they were even born. The truth is that you watched your mother offer me money to abort them and said nothing. Is that the truth they deserve? Nicholas sank onto the edge of a chair, tears streaming unchecked down his face. Something Alaya had never imagined witnessing. I was young, stupid, and cowardly. I let my parents control my life. I lost you. I lost my daughters. I lost the chance to be a real man. For a moment, Alaya felt an unexpected twinge of compassion. 8 years ago, she would have given anything to hear these words. Now they arrived too late to heal the original wound, yet perhaps not too late for something else. I can't undo what I did, Nicholas continued, his voice breaking, but I can at least try to do the right thing now. And what would the right thing be, Nicholas? What do you really want? He hesitated. To know them. Not as a father. I don't deserve that title. Just to know them. Alaya walked to the window, observing the city awakening below. I'll think about it, but with absolute conditions. No Wellington in their name, no public announcements, no attempts to buy them with extravagant gifts, and Eleanor stays completely out of it. I agree to everything. And one more thing. If at any point I perceive that your presence causes any confusion or suffering to my daughters, you disappear forever. No discussion. I understand. When Nicholas left, Alaya felt a weight lifting from her shoulders, not from the possibility of reconciliation, but from the final liberation. The power he had held over her, the ghost of his rejection, the pain of abandonment, all finally dissipating. 3 months later, Alaya observed from a distance as Nicholas, introduced to the girls simply as a friend of Mom's who also loves chess, played a match with Daya. Their interaction was cautious, almost formal. He would never be the father they deserved, but perhaps he could be a positive peripheral presence in their lives. Lena approached Alaya. He plays like you, Mom. The same moves. Yes, Alaya replied softly. We played together a long time ago. Do you like him? Lena asked curiously. Alaya considered the question. I like the person he's trying to become. As she watched the man who had once destroyed her desperately trying to earn the respect of a child who didn't know she was his daughter, Alaya understood that her revenge wasn't in Nicholas's exposure or humiliation. It was in the full, successful life she had built without him. It was in the extraordinary daughters she had raised alone. It was in the revolutionary company she led. Nicholas looked at her briefly, his eyes communicating a painful understanding of what he had lost. Not just a family, but the chance to be part of something genuinely meaningful. Alaya smiled, not with anger or bitterness, but with the serenity of someone finally at peace. The final piece on the board had moved. Checkmate. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.